The letter from Boston trembled in Sarah Calloway's hands as she stepped off the stage coach into the dust of Hawthorne, Nevada, in the spring of 1873. A name could be a sanctuary or a prison, and for 3 years hers had been the latter. "Madam, you need help with those bags." The stagecoach driver's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "No, thank you," Sarah replied, adjusting her simple blue traveling dress. 25 years of age and twice widowed, she stood alone in a town where no one knew her story. That was precisely how she wanted it. The main street of Hawthorne bustled with afternoon activity. Horses tied to hitching posts stamped impatiently while miners, cowboys, and townspeople moved about their business. The Nevada sun beat down relentlessly, making Sarah wish she'd worn a lighter bonnet for the journey. She'd come west with nothing but 2 carpetbags and a desperate need to escape. The advertisement had been simple: rancher seeks bride, woman of good character and sturdy constitution, passage paid. Sarah had responded immediately, exchanging several letters with Clayton Evans over the past 2 months. Clayton had seemed kind in his correspondence, direct but gentle, honest about the hardships of ranch life, but also about his loneliness. When he'd agreed to her unusual condition that she would not take his surname until she was certain their match would last, he'd earned her cautious respect. "Miss Calloway." A deep voice called from behind her. Sarah turned to find a tall man approaching, his gait steady and unhurried. His face was partially shadowed by a worn leather hat, but she could see he was perhaps 30, with sun-weathered skin and keen blue eyes that assessed her with undisguised curiosity. "Mr. Evans?" she asked, her voice steadier than she felt. He nodded, removing his hat to reveal dark blonde hair. "Clayton Evans, welcome to Hawthorne." He didn't smile exactly, but something in his expression softened. "Journey treat you all right?" "Well enough, thank you." Sarah met his gaze directly. If she was to marry this man, this stranger, she needed to understand him, and quickly. Clayton reached for her bags. "Wagon's just over yonder. Ranch is about an hour's ride." As they walked, Sarah felt the stares of townspeople. A mail-order bride was nothing unusual in these parts, but the townspeople's curiosity was palpable nonetheless. "Your letters didn't mention much about your past," Clayton said, helping her onto the wagon seat. "Nor did yours," she replied. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Fair enough." He clicked to the horses and the wagon lurched forward. "I reckon we've got time to get acquainted." The road out of Hawthorne soon gave way to open country. Mountains rose in the distance, their peaks still capped with snow despite the spring warmth below. Sarah had never seen such vast open spaces, such unclaimed sky. "It's beautiful," she said softly, breaking the silence. Clayton glanced at her. "Gets in your blood. Can't imagine living anywhere else now." He paused. "What brings a Boston lady out to Nevada territory?" Sarah's hands tightened in her lap. "A fresh start. Most folks come west for that." Clayton didn't press but added, "Ranch life ain't easy, especially for a city woman." "I'm stronger than I look, Mr. Evans." "Clayton," he corrected. "If we're to be married, might as well use my given name." Sarah nodded but didn't offer the same familiarity in return. Names held power, and she had learned that lesson painfully. "About your condition," Clayton said carefully. "Keeping your own name. Don't rightly understand it, but I agreed to it." His eyes stayed on the road ahead. "Town's gonna talk, though. Let them. I'll be Mrs. Evans in time, perhaps, but I need—" She stopped herself. "I appreciate your understanding." Clayton nodded slowly. "Got my reasons for wanting a wife. Company, mainly. Someone to make the place a home. Been alone too long." His hands were steady on the reins. "Don't much care what name you go by, long as you're there." The honesty in his voice surprised her. Here was a man who understood loneliness, who wasn't afraid to admit it. Something in Sarah's chest loosened slightly. The Evans ranch came into view as they crested a gentle rise. A sturdy two-story house stood proudly against the landscape, with a large barn and several outbuildings nearby. Cattle dotted the distant pastures, and a creek wound its way through the property. "It's not what you're used to," Clayton said, misinterpreting her silence for disappointment. "No," Sarah agreed. "It's far better than anything I imagined." For the first time, Clayton smiled fully, transforming his solemn face. "Been working this land 15 years now. Started with nothing but a claim and determination." He helped her down from the wagon, his hands strong and calloused. Sarah felt a brief flutter in her stomach at his touch, but quickly suppressed it. This was a practical arrangement, nothing more. "We'll be married tomorrow if that suits," Clayton said as he carried her bags inside. "Pastor Miller comes through town every few weeks. He's here now." Sarah followed him into the house. The main room was clean but sparse, a table with 4 chairs, a stone fireplace, and simple furniture. No feminine touches, no unnecessary comforts, a bachelor's home. "That would be suitable," she replied, removing her bonnet. Clayton watched her for a moment, then nodded. "Got a room ready for you upstairs. Figured you'd want your privacy until—" He cleared his throat. "Until we're properly wed. I'll sleep in the bunkhouse tonight." Sarah appreciated his consideration. "Thank you." After showing her the kitchen, the pump for water, and her bedroom, Clayton excused himself to tend to evening chores. Left alone, Sarah sank onto the edge of the bed and finally allowed herself to tremble. She was about to marry a stranger in a strange land. Again. Her first marriage at 18 had been for love, or what she'd thought was love. Thomas Sheffield had been charming, handsome, and cruel. For 2 years, she'd endured his rages, his gambling, his humiliation. The Sheffield name became synonymous with fear and shame in her mind. After Thomas died in a bar fight, Sarah had returned to her family home only to discover her parents had arranged another match to Harold Blackwell, a business associate of her father's. Twice her age and cold as stone, Blackwell had treated her like property. When fever had taken him just 8 months into their marriage, Sarah had felt nothing but relief. 2 dead husbands. 2 cursed names she'd carried. Each had marked her, changed her. Sheffield had left her with scars both visible and hidden. Blackwell with nightmares of cold, empty rooms and colder, emptier words. Sarah opened her carpetbag and removed a small leather journal. Inside, she'd recorded every moment of her previous marriages, every hurt, every fear. Not as a memoir, but as a reminder never to be so vulnerable again. Tomorrow she would wed Clayton Evans. But she would remain Sarah Calloway until she was certain this name would bring no curse upon her. The morning dawned clear and bright. Sarah dressed in her best gown, a modest dove gray silk with lace at the collar and cuffs. She'd brought no veil, no orange blossoms. This was a contract, not a celebration. Clayton knocked on her door at 9 o'clock, dressed in a clean black coat, white shirt, and string tie. He'd trimmed his beard and slicked back his hair, looking surprisingly handsome in his formal attire. "Ready?" he asked simply. Sarah nodded, following him downstairs and back onto the wagon. The ride to town was quiet, both lost in their own thoughts. At the small white church, Pastor Miller greeted them warmly. 2 of Clayton's neighbors, Samuel Wilson and his wife Martha, served as witnesses. The ceremony was brief and to the point. When Pastor Miller asked for the bride's name, Clayton answered for her. "Sarah Calloway for now, Pastor." "We've an agreement about the name." The pastor looked startled but continued. When the moment came to pronounce them, he hesitated only briefly before declaring, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." No mention of names. No Mr. and Mrs. Evans. just husband and wife. Clayton kissed her cheek, gently a brush of lips, nothing more, and then they signed the marriage certificate. Sarah wrote her maiden name with steady hands. The Wilsons insisted on treating them to a meal at Hawthorne's only restaurant. Throughout lunch, Martha Wilson chattered about ranch life, offering advice and friendship. Sarah found herself warming to the older woman's kindness. "It'll take time to adjust," Martha said quietly when the men stepped outside to smoke. "Clayton's a good man, though. One of the best in the territory, quiet but decent through and through." "Thank you," Sarah replied. "I'm hopeful." Martha squeezed her hand. "Any particular reason you're keeping your name, dear, if you don't mind my asking?" Sarah tensed. "Personal reasons, of course." Martha nodded understandingly. "Just know folks will talk. Not that it matters what they say, mind you." The ride back to the ranch, her new home, felt different. Something had shifted, subtle but unmistakable. They were bound now, legally if not yet in other ways. "I'll get the bedroom across from yours ready," Clayton said as they approached the house. "Until you're comfortable." Sarah turned to him, surprised. "That's not necessary. I understand my duties as a wife." Clayton's expression remained steady. "Marriage is more than duty, Sarah. I want a partner, not an obligation." He paused. "We've got time." Relief and gratitude washed through her. "Thank you," she whispered. That night they ate a simple supper together. Clayton told her about the ranch, 60 head of cattle, plans for expanding, the challenges of ranching in Nevada's unpredictable climate. Sarah listened, asking thoughtful questions, beginning to understand this quiet, steady man who was now her husband. Later, in her room, still hers alone, Sarah wrote in her journal, "I am married again. Clayton Evans is nothing like Thomas or Harold. There is a patience in him, a kindness that appears genuine, but I have been deceived before. Time will tell if the Evans name carries a curse for me. For now, I remain Sarah Calloway, protected by caution and distance." Days turned into weeks as Sarah settled into ranch life. She learned to cook on the temperamental wood stove, to preserve vegetables from the kitchen garden, to manage the household with efficiency despite its remoteness. Clayton worked from dawn until dusk, returning tired but always taking time to share the events of his day. They developed a routine, comfortable but with clear boundaries. Clayton never pushed, never demanded. He slept across the hall and knocked before entering her room. His patience confused Sarah at first, then gradually earned her trust. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple, Clayton finally asked about her past. "Don't mean to pry," he said, his voice low, "but sometimes you get a look like you're remembering something painful." He turned to meet her eyes. "Were you married before, Sarah?" She stiffened. "Why do you ask? The way you insisted on keeping your name, the way you flinch sometimes when I move too quick." His eyes were gentle. "Someone hurt you, I reckon." Sarah looked away, watching a hawk circle in the distance. "Yes," she finally said, "I was married, twice." Clayton waited, giving her space to continue or not. "My first husband, Thomas Sheffield, was—" She took a deep breath. "Violent when he drank, which was often." The words came haltingly. "He died in a fight. My second husband was chosen by my father, Harold Blackwell. He was cold, controlling in different ways." Clayton's hands tightened on the arms of his chair, but he remained silent. "Their names became curses to me," Sarah continued, voice stronger now. "Each time I was called Mrs. Sheffield or Mrs. Blackwell, it felt like a collar tightening around my neck. I couldn't breathe under the weight of those names." "So you kept Calloway?" "Yes. My father's name wasn't always kind, but it was mine first, before the others." She finally looked at him. "I needed to know that the Evans name wouldn't become another curse." Clayton nodded slowly. "Appreciate you telling me, makes sense now." He stood, careful to move deliberately. "No rush, Sarah. Name's just letters until you're ready to wear it." That night, Sarah slept more peacefully than she had in years. As spring gave way to summer, Sarah found herself drawn more to Clayton. His steady presence, his quiet strength, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, these things began to matter. She noticed how he never raised his voice, even when a hand got trampled during branding. How he always asked her opinion on ranch decisions. How he brought wildflowers sometimes and left them in a jar on the kitchen table without comment. In July, disaster struck. A lightning storm sparked a wildfire that threatened their southern pastures. Clayton and his two ranch hands worked desperately to move the cattle and create fire breaks. Sarah watched from the porch, heart in her throat, as flames licked the horizon. When Clayton hadn't returned by nightfall, she saddled a horse, something she'd learned just weeks before, and rode toward the glow, carrying canteens of water and food. She found them exhausted, faces black with soot, still fighting to protect the herd. Clayton's expression when he saw her mixed relief, concern, and something deeper, pride. "You shouldn't be here," he said, taking the water gratefully. "Where else would I be?" Sarah replied simply. They worked through the night together. By dawn, the wind had shifted, pushing the fire away from their land. The cattle were safe. Clayton's shoulders sagged with exhaustion, and without thinking, Sarah slipped her arm around his waist to support him. "Let's go home," she said softly. His arm went around her shoulders, and together they walked to the horses. "Thank you," Clayton murmured. That night, after they'd both bathed away the smoke and ash, Sarah knocked on Clayton's bedroom door. When he opened it, surprise evident on his tired face, she stepped forward and kissed him gently. "I'd like to stay," she whispered against his lips. Clayton's eyes searched hers. "You sure?" Sarah nodded, and he drew her into his room, closing the door behind them. Their lovemaking was tender, gentle, nothing like what Sarah had known before. Clayton treated her body with reverence, asking permission with his eyes at each new touch. For the first time, Sarah felt desire rather than duty, pleasure rather than pain. Afterward, lying in his arms, she felt tears sliding down her cheeks. "Did I hurt you?" Clayton asked, alarmed. "No," Sarah replied, smiling through tears. "That's why I'm crying." In the warm darkness, she told him everything, every detail she'd kept locked away. The bruises Thomas had left, hidden beneath high collars and long sleeves. The humiliation of Harold's indifference, his clinical approach to their marriage bed. The whispers in Boston that followed her, the twice-widowed woman, the Black Widow, the cursed bride. Clayton listened without interruption, his arms steady around her. When she finished, he kissed her forehead. "Those men never deserved you," he said, voice rough with emotion. "What happened wasn't your fault, Sarah." "Their names felt like shackles," she admitted. "Each time I was called by them, I felt marked, trapped." Clayton was quiet for so long that Sarah wondered if he'd fallen asleep. Finally, he spoke. "A name's what you make of it. My pa was Clayton Evans too, and he was a mean drunk who abandoned my ma when I was 5. Hated sharing his name growing up." His fingers traced patterns on her arm. "But I decided the name would mean something different when I carried it, that I'd make it stand for something better." Sarah nestled closer to him, understanding dawning. "You're not like them, not like Thomas or Harold." "No," he agreed. "And you're not the woman they tried to make you be." In the weeks that followed, Sarah and Clayton grew closer in every way. She moved permanently into his bedroom, and they settled into a deeper partnership. He taught her to ride properly, to shoot a rifle for protection, to read the weather from cloud patterns. She brought warmth to their home, planted flowers along the walkway, and began hosting dinner for neighboring ranchers and their wives. The Evans Ranch prospered under their joint care. Clayton expanded the herd, while Sarah started a small side business selling preserves and baked goods in town. They complemented each other, her quick mind and social graces balancing his steady determination and practical knowledge. But Sarah still signed her letters and accounts as Sarah Calloway. The town continued to whisper, though less with each passing month as they witnessed the obvious contentment of the unusual couple. In October, as the aspen trees turned golden on the mountainsides, Sarah awoke feeling ill. After 3 mornings of nausea, she visited Martha Wilson, who had once been a midwife. "You're carrying a child," Martha confirmed, eyes twinkling. "I'd say you're about 8 weeks along, due in late spring." Sarah's hands flew to her still flat stomach, joy and terror mixing in equal measure. "A baby," she whispered. "Clayton will be over the moon," Martha said, patting her hand. "That man's been looking at you like you hung the stars since the day you arrived." Sarah rode home slowly, mind whirling. A child, a new life they had created together. A child who would need a name, a family name. Clayton was mending fence in the north pasture. When he saw her riding toward him, he set down his tools and walked to meet her. "Everything all right?" he asked, helping her dismount. "You were looking peaked this morning." Sarah took his hands in hers. "I've just come from Martha's." She took a deep breath. "I'm with child, Clayton." His face transformed shock, then wonder, then such joy that it took her breath away. "A baby," he whispered, as if saying it too loudly might make it disappear. Sarah nodded, smiling through sudden tears. Clayton whooped, lifting her carefully and spinning her around. "A baby," he shouted to the empty pasture, to the mountains beyond, to the vast Nevada sky. When he set her down, he knelt suddenly, pressing his face gently against her stomach. "Hello in there," he said softly. "Your pa's already mighty proud of you." Sarah's hand went to his hair, stroking it as emotion overwhelmed her. This good man, this gentle soul who had never pushed, never demanded, only offered and waited and loved. That evening, as they sat by the fire planning for the baby's arrival, Sarah made a decision. "I'd like to change my name," she said quietly. Clayton looked up from the cradle design he was sketching. "How's that? I'd like to be Sarah Evans now, properly, on paper and in name." Clayton set down his pencil. "You sure? No rush, Sarah. I told you I'm sure," she interrupted. "The Evans name isn't a curse. It's a blessing." She placed her hand over his. "You've shown me that a name can be a sanctuary, not a prison. I want our child to have your name." "I want to have your name." Clayton's eyes grew suspiciously bright. "Well then," he said, voice husky, "Sarah Evans it is." The next day they rode into Hawthorne together. At the county clerk's office, Sarah signed the document that officially changed her name. As they walked down the street afterward, the general store owner called out to them. "Afternoon, Mrs. Evans." "Mr. Evans." Sarah turned, smiling broadly. "Good afternoon, Mr. Brown." For the first time, the title felt like freedom rather than confinement. Clayton squeezed her hand, understanding without words what this moment meant. Winter came early that year, harsh and unforgiving. The ranch was isolated by heavy snow for weeks at a time. But inside their home, Sarah and Clayton created warmth and joy. Her stomach grew rounder, and Clayton took to talking to the baby each night, telling stories about the ranch, about the mountains, about the life they would share. In December, a blizzard raged for 3 days. When it finally cleared, Clayton rode out to check on the cattle. He returned with frostbitten fingers and news that they'd lost 5 head to the cold. "Could have been worse," he said as Sarah treated his hands. "Wilson lost 15. That night, as they lay in bed listening to the wind howl outside, Clayton placed his palm on Sarah's rounded belly. "What would you think of naming the baby Thomas if it's a boy?" he asked quietly. Sarah stiffened. "Why would you suggest that?" Clayton's eyes met hers. To take the power from the name, to show that names themselves aren't cursed, only the people who wear them. His voice was gentle. But it was just a thought. We'll choose something else. Sarah lay awake long after Clayton had fallen asleep, thinking about names and power and healing. In the darkness, she felt the baby move a strong kick against her ribs and smiled. By spring, the ranch was busy with new life. Calves wobbled beside their mothers in the pastures, wildflowers carpeted the meadows, and Sarah's time drew near. Clayton hired a woman from town to help with household chores, and Martha Wilson promised to attend the birth. On a warm May morning, Sarah's labor began. Clayton paced anxiously outside their bedroom as Martha and the town doctor helped Sarah through 18 hours of difficult labor. When the baby's cries finally pierced the air, Clayton nearly broke down the door in his haste. "A son," Dr. Peterson announced, smiling. "A healthy boy." Sarah lay exhausted but radiant, cradling their child. Clayton approached almost reverently, sitting beside her on the bed. "He's perfect," he whispered, touching the baby's tiny hand. "Look what we made, Sarah." "Would you like to hold your son?" she asked, offering the swaddled bundle. Clayton took the baby with careful hands, tears streaming unashamedly down his face. "Hello, son," he murmured. "I'm your pa." Sarah watched them together, her heart so full it might burst. "I've been thinking about names," she said softly. Clayton looked up, his expression open. "What do you think?" "Not Thomas," she said firmly. "But not because the name has power over me anymore." She reached to touch their son's downy head. "I was thinking we might call him Christopher. Christopher Clayton Evans." "Christopher," Clayton repeated, testing it. "It's a fine name, strong." "For a new beginning," Sarah said. "Our beginning." The summer and fall passed in a blur of baby milestones and ranch work. Christopher Kit, as they came to call him, grew robust and curious, with Clayton's blue eyes and Sarah's determined chin. Sarah found motherhood both more challenging and more rewarding than she had imagined. Clayton proved himself an attentive father, often carrying Kit with him for ranch chores, pointing out cattle and birds and plants to the wide-eyed baby. In December, just after Kit's 7th month, Sarah organized a Christmas gathering for neighboring ranchers and townspeople. The Evans ranch had prospered and they had much to celebrate. Sarah wanted to share their good fortune. The house filled with guests, music, and laughter. Among them was a new arrival to Hawthorne, Dr. Peterson's younger sister, Caroline, recently widowed and relocated from San Francisco. During the evening, Sarah overheard Caroline speaking with Martha Wilson. "Such a lovely family," Caroline said, watching Clayton bounce Kit on his knee while talking cattle prices with Samuel Wilson. "Though I admit, I was confused at first when Thomas in the general store mentioned the Evans family where the wife kept her maiden name for nearly a year." Martha glanced around, then leaned closer. Sarah had her reasons. Been married before to men who treated her poorly. The names became like curses to her. Caroline's expression softened with understanding. "Ah, that explains it. I felt something similar after Henry died. For months I couldn't bear to hear Mrs. Peterson. It reminded me of everything I'd lost." "Exactly," Martha nodded. But Clayton gave her time, never pushed. Eventually she took his name willingly. "A good man," Caroline mused, watching Clayton now. "Those are rare enough." "The Evans name suits her now," Martha said. "She wears it like a crown instead of a collar." Sarah stepped forward, startling both women. "It does suit me," she said softly, "because Clayton gave me a choice, not an obligation." Caroline blushed, embarrassed at being overheard, but Sarah touched her arm gently. "Please don't be uncomfortable. What Martha said is true." She glanced at Clayton across the room. "I was cursed by my previous husband's names. Each one represented pain and fear." But Clayton gave me his name as a gift, not a requirement. He waited until I was ready to accept it. Caroline's eyes showed understanding. That makes all the difference, doesn't it? Being offered something rather than having it imposed. Exactly, Sarah smiled. The Evans name erased the pain of the others because it came with love, not ownership. Later that evening, when the guests had departed and Kit was asleep in his cradle, Sarah and Clayton stood on the porch looking at stars scattered like diamonds across the winter sky. "Successful party," Clayton said, his arm around her shoulders. "Yes," Sarah agreed, leaning into his warmth. "I overheard something interesting tonight." "Oh," Martha telling Caroline about my name, about why I kept Calloway for so long. Clayton stiffened slightly. "Hope that didn't upset you." Sarah turned to face him, taking both his hands in hers. "Not at all. It made me realize something." She squeezed his fingers. "When I came here, I believed names had power to curse a woman. Sheffield, Blackwell, they were like brands marking me as property." Clayton listened quietly, his eyes never leaving hers. "But you showed me that a name can be a gift, freely given and freely taken." She reached up to touch his face. "You gave me the Evans name and erased the pain of those that came before. Not by demanding I take it, but by letting me choose when I was ready." Clayton turned his head to kiss her palm. "You're not property, Sarah, never were. You're my partner, my heart." "And proudly Sarah Evans," she finished, rising on her toes to kiss him. Above them, a shooting star blazed across the night sky, brilliant, free, and unbound. By Kit's first birthday, the Evans ranch had doubled in size. Clayton's careful management and Sarah's shrewd business sense had allowed them to purchase neighboring land when old man Henderson decided to return east. They now employed 4 full-time ranch hands and had built a larger bunkhouse to accommodate them. Sarah had expanded her preserves business into a small but profitable enterprise, selling her goods not just in Hawthorne but to merchants as far away as Carson City. The Evans Preserve Company label, which she had designed herself, featured mountains and wildflowers encircling the family name. Kit grew into a sturdy, curious toddler, following Clayton everywhere and babbling constantly. His first clear word was "Pa," which had brought tears to Clayton's eyes. Mama followed shortly after, usually shouted at full volume whenever Sarah came into view. On the anniversary of their wedding, Clayton surprised Sarah with a silver locket. Inside was a small family portrait, Clayton, Sarah, and Kit, that they'd had taken on a trip to Carson City. "Open the back, too," Clayton urged as they sat before the fire after Kit was asleep. Sarah turned the locket over and discovered an inscription. "S.E. Names freely given are the most precious." "Clayton," she breathed, deeply touched. "It's beautiful." "Wanted you to have something to remember," he said, suddenly shy. "How far we've come." Sarah fastened the locket around her neck, then leaned forward to kiss him deeply. "I love you, Clayton Evans. And I love you, Sarah Evans." He pulled her onto his lap, his arms strong around her waist. "More each day." Later that night, nestled against his chest, Sarah confessed, "I've been thinking about expanding our family. Kit is old enough now and the ranch is doing well." Clayton's arms tightened around her. "Nothing would make me happier." By the following spring, Sarah was expecting their second child. This pregnancy proved easier than the first, though chasing after an active toddler while managing her growing business left her exhausted by day's end. Clayton hired a local girl, Betsy Miller, to help with Kit and the house 3 days a week. One crisp October afternoon, as Sarah was making apple preserves, a rider approached the ranch. Clayton was out with the herd and Sarah stepped onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron, Kit clinging to her skirts. The stranger dismounted, removing his hat. "Madam," he nodded. "Looking for Sarah Sheffield. Heard she might be in these parts." Sarah froze, the name hitting her like a physical blow. "Who's asking?" The man approached, stopping respectfully at the bottom of the porch steps. "Name's William Sheffield. Thomas was my brother." Sarah's hand instinctively went to her rounded stomach while the other pulled Kit closer. "Thomas Sheffield has been dead for 5 years, Mr. Sheffield." "Yes, I know. Been trying to track you down since." His eyes took in her condition, the child at her side, the prosperous ranch around them. "I see you've done well for yourself. What do you want?" Sarah asked, keeping her voice level despite her racing heart. "Thomas left some property in Pennsylvania. Coal rights mainly, worth something now." William shifted uncomfortably. "As his widow, you're entitled to a portion, that's all. Came to let you know." Before Sarah could respond, hoofbeats sounded behind William Sheffield. Clayton rode up, dismounting in one fluid motion, his expression guarded. "Everything all right, Sarah?" he asked, eyes never leaving the stranger. "This is William Sheffield," Sarah said steadily. "Thomas's brother." Clayton moved to stand beside Sarah on the porch, his shoulder touching hers in silent support. "Mr. Sheffield," he nodded. "I'm Clayton Evans, Sarah's husband." William looked between them. "Meant no disrespect coming here, just trying to settle family business." He handed an envelope to Clayton. "Papers inside explain everything. Lawyer's address in Carson City who's handling it." Clayton took the envelope but didn't open it. "Appreciate you bringing this by. Sarah will decide what she wants to do about it." William nodded, clearly relieved the encounter hadn't gone worse. "I'll be at the Hawthorne Hotel through tomorrow if you have questions." He replaced his hat, tipped it slightly. "Good day to you both." As he rode away, Sarah realized she was trembling. Clayton's arm went around her waist, solid and reassuring. "You all right?" he asked quietly. Sarah took a deep breath, looking down at Kit, who was now playing contentedly with a wooden horse at their feet, then at Clayton beside her, her protector, her partner, her love. "Yes," she said, surprised to find it was true. "The Sheffield name has no power over me anymore, hasn't for a long time." That night, after discussing the unexpected inheritance which they decided to donate to the new school being built in Hawthorne, Sarah and Clayton sat on their porch watching the sunset, as had become their custom. "Something's been on my mind," Clayton said, his voice thoughtful. "That day Sheffield's brother showed up. You didn't flinch when he called you Sarah Sheffield, not once." Sarah considered this. "I didn't, did I?" She smiled slightly. "Because that's not who I am anymore. I'm Sarah Evans now, completely and wholly." Clayton reached for her hand. "You know, when you first insisted on keeping Calloway, I didn't understand. Felt a bit slighted, if I'm being honest." He squeezed her fingers. "But now I see what a gift you gave me when you finally took my name. It wasn't just words on paper, it was trust. Complete trust." "The greatest gift was yours to me," Sarah countered softly. "You gave me time to heal. You showed me that a name could be a bond of love, not a mark of ownership." In November, their daughter Emily Rose was born, a delicate, fair-haired beauty with Sarah's green eyes. Kit, now nearly 2, was fascinated by his tiny sister, constantly wanting to touch her and bring her his toys. As Christmas approached, Sarah wrote in her journal for the first time in months. "The Evans name now graces 4 souls in this house. Clayton, who carries it with honor and kindness. Myself, who chose it freely as a symbol of love and trust. Kit and Emily, who will grow knowing that names should represent family bonds, not ownership or fear. The curses of Sheffield and Blackwell are long broken. Those names no longer have power over me. I am Sarah Evans, wife of Clayton, mother of Kit and Emily, mistress of this ranch, owner of my own business. I'm not defined by my past suffering, but by the love I have found and the family we have built. Names are powerful, yes. but their power comes not from the arrangement of letters but from the hearts of those who bear them. The Evans name is my sanctuary, my joy, my pride. Clayton gave me his name and erased my pain by making it a choice, not a demand. In doing so, he taught me that true love never seeks to possess, it only wishes to share. 10 years passed, bringing both joys and hardships. The Evans Ranch weathered drought, economic downturns, and the changing landscape of the West. Kit grew into a thoughtful young man of 11, already showing Clayton's head for ranch management. Emily, now 9, combined Sarah's determination with Clayton's steady patience, excelling in the Hawthorne school and developing a talent for drawing. They had added another son, James, when Kit was 4, completing their family. The Evans household was known throughout the county for its hospitality, prosperity, and the strong partnership at its center. On their 10th anniversary, Clayton and Sarah hosted a grand celebration. Friends from across Nevada territory gathered to mark the occasion. As twilight fell, Clayton called for everyone's attention, raising a glass toward Sarah. 10 years ago, this remarkable woman took a chance on a lonely rancher, he said, his voice carrying across the gathered crowd. She came west with nothing but courage and determination, but she taught me the most valuable lesson of my life. Sarah watched him, love swelling in her chest. She showed me that the greatest gifts are those freely given, Clayton continued. That names and promises mean nothing without choice behind them. He raised his glass higher. To Sarah Evans, who chose to share my name and my life, who made this ranch a home and my heart full. To Sarah, the guests echoed, raising their glasses. Later, as the party continued around them, Clayton drew Sarah away from the crowd, toward their favorite spot overlooking the valley. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. He handed her a small wooden box. Inside was a gold ring set with emeralds that matched her eyes. "Clayton," she gasped, "it's beautiful." "Turn it over," he urged. Inside the band was an inscription. "S.E. Freely chosen, forever cherished." "Our wedding rings were simple," Clayton said as he slipped it onto her finger above her plain gold band. "Thought after 10 years, you deserved something that tells our story." Sarah looked up at him, this man who had helped her heal, who had given her a name to wear with pride rather than shame. "Our story isn't in the jewelry," she said softly. "It's in the life we've built. The children we've raised, the love we've grown." "Still," Clayton smiled, "doesn't hurt to have a reminder." Sarah twined her arms around his neck, pressing her forehead to his. "I don't need reminders. Every time someone calls me Mrs. Evans, I feel blessed rather than burdened." "You gave me that, Clayton. You gave me back my freedom by never demanding I surrender it." In the distance, Kit's laughter rang out as he chased Emily through the gathering, James toddling behind them. The Evans children, carrying a name given in love, untainted by fear. "Look at them," Clayton murmured, turning to watch their children. "Best thing we ever did." Sarah nodded, leaning against his strong shoulder. "They'll never know what it means to fear a name. They'll carry Evans proudly." "And if Emily someday chooses to take another name," Clayton asked. "Then she'll do it freely, knowing her worth isn't tied to the name she bears." Sarah smiled up at him. "That's the legacy we've created: choice, respect, love without possession." Clayton kissed her then under the vast Nevada sky that had witnessed their journey from strangers to soulmates. In that moment, Sarah felt the last lingering shadows of her past dissolve completely. She was Sarah Evans, not branded by the name, but elevated by it. Not defined by it, but complemented by it. The name that had once seemed a potential curse had become her greatest blessing, not because of its letters, but because of the man who shared it with her. As they walked back to join their guests, their children, Their community, Sarah's hand found Clayton's, fingers interlacing with practiced ease. Together they moved forward into the gathering dusk, two people who had found in each other not possession but partnership, not obligation but choice. Not a curse, but a blessing. "I love you, Clayton Evans," Sarah whispered. "And I love you, Sarah Evans," he replied, her freely chosen name on his lips sounding like the sweetest music ever composed.